The cafe was already alive with the morning rush. Steam rose from coffee machines, the smell of freshly baked pastries filled the air, and soft chatter mixed with the clatter of cups and plates. Maggie moved quickly between tables, her apron tied tightly around her waist, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her movements were precise, almost like a dance she had performed 1,000 times. But her mind was elsewhere, racing through the worries of her life. She had bills to pay, groceries to buy, and a daughter waiting for her at home, counting on her to make life a little easier than it actually was. Some days it felt impossible to keep everything balanced. She loved her job, she really did, but the long hours and constant pressure made it exhausting. Every tip mattered, every smile she gave mattered, because in the end, it all helped to keep her small family afloat. It was then that the bell above the cafe door jingled, and Maggie glanced up. A man entered, dressed in a tailored suit that immediately marked him as someone important. He had a quiet confidence in the way he walked, a presence that demanded attention without ever raising his voice. Behind him, in a specially designed stroller, was a small boy with dark eyes that seemed older than his years. His expression was serious, almost as if he carried the weight of the world on his tiny shoulders. Maggie's first instinct was to smile warmly at them. She had learned long ago that a smile could ease tension, sometimes even change someone's day. The man's eyes scanned the cafe briefly before settling on an empty table by the window. There was something careful, almost cautious. In the way he moved, he was alert, aware of every obstacle, every sound, and every person around him. Maggie noticed it immediately. She had grown used to reading people, understanding their moods and needs before they even spoke. There was an unspoken story in his eyes, a mixture of love, concern, and exhaustion. She could tell he was used to handling a lot of responsibility, but with a softness reserved only for the boy beside him. As she approached their table, Maggie took in the small details. The boy's hands were curled tightly around the sides of his stroller, his little legs restless. The man, presumably his father, gently tried to soothe him, speaking in soft tones, leaning over slightly. Maggie could see that even in the simplest act of trying to lift the boy or settle him comfortably, there was a struggle. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Constant balancing act between wanting to protect him and needing to live a normal life outside, the challenges his condition brought. Maggie set down the menu with a practiced hand, kneeling slightly to meet the boy's eyes. "Hi there, my name's Maggie. Would you like to see what yummy things we have today?" she asked gently, her voice light and playful. The boy blinked slowly, unsure at first, but something in her tone made him relax just a fraction. Maggie had always had a way with children. Perhaps it was because she had grown up taking care of her younger siblings. Maybe because she had learned early that kindness could bridge almost any gap. Whatever the reason, the boy responded with a tiny, tentative smile, and Maggie's heart lifted. The father watched silently. Maggie could feel his gaze on her, studying her without judgment, but with a careful evaluation. It wasn't often that someone else stepped in with such ease when his son was involved. Jonathan, as she would later learn his name was, had lived a life where people either didn't understand or didn't care about the challenges he faced daily. And yet here was this woman, moving naturally, treating his son with patience and genuine warmth. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, only a steady, comforting presence. I see. It was almost surprising in its simplicity, but also profoundly moving. Maggie knew from experience that small gestures mattered, especially in moments like this. The boy's restlessness was a sign of discomfort, a signal that his needs weren't being fully met. She leaned in closer, her hands gentle but confident, speaking to him directly in soft, soothing tones. She offered him a small piece of fruit from the tray she carried, and when he reached for it, the boy's eyes lit up for the first time that morning. Jonathan's lips pressed together, a subtle but unmistakable expression of relief and gratitude crossing his face. It was a look Maggie had seen before in people who had spent their lives carrying burdens alone quiet. It's contained, but deep and heartfelt. Even though she had only just arrived at their table, Maggie felt a strange connection forming. She could sense the challenges this father faced, the love he had for his son, and the patience it demanded. And she also felt a recognition of something familiar, the struggle to make life work, to provide, to care deeply for someone else. And sometimes, to feel completely exhausted in the process. It was a shared understanding, unspoken but powerful, that bridged the gap between a busy waitress and a wealthy man used to controlling everything around him. As she took their order, Maggie continued to engage the boy, asking him gently which juice he would like, encouraging him with a soft laugh when he tried to answer but struggled with words. Jonathan's eyes softened in response, and Maggie could see him relax just slightly in a way he hadn't before entering the cafe. There, it was a moment quiet and fleeting when the chaos of the cafe seemed to fade around them. The clatter of dishes, the rush of other customers, even the persistent hum of the coffee machine, all of it became background noise to a scene of connection and care. Maggie finished taking their order and moved on to prepare the food, but she kept glancing back, checking that the boy was comfortable and that Jonathan seemed at ease. She knew that in small ways, the simple acts of attention and care could have enormous meaning. She had lived long enough to understand that life often didn't give second chances for kindness. And yet here was an opportunity to make a difference, even if it was just in this small, ordinary morning at a cafe. The father, Jonathan, watched her quietly from across the table. He noticed the way she moved, efficient, confident, yet soft and approachable. He noticed the warmth in her interactions with his son, the careful balance she maintained between playfulness and patience. Something in him shifted, a spark of recognition that this was not just another person going through their day. This was someone who, without knowing it, was showing him the kind of empathy he had longed to see in the world around him. Maggie, meanwhile, carried on with her work, unaware of the impact she was making. To her, it was just part of the job, helping people, serving meals, making others feel seen. But in the quiet connection she had made with the father and son, there was a ripple starting, subtle but undeniable. The simplicity of her kindness, the natural way she engaged with the boy, was something that Jonathan would remember long after they left the cafe. It was the kind of memory that stayed with a person, a reminder that genuine care could be found in the most unexpected places. Even in a small cafe on a busy morning, as the meal continued, the boy relaxed further, leaning slightly against his father, but still responding to Maggie's gentle coaxing and playful encouragement. Jonathan allowed himself a brief moment of ease, letting go of the tight control he usually maintained. For just a little while he could see his son smile without effort, hear him laugh without worry, and feel the lightness of connection with someone who simply understood. In that brief interlude, the boundaries between employer and employee, between rich and ordinary, between caretaker and observer, all of it dissolved into something far more human. Maggie's presence was steady, her energy warm, and the father's initial reserve softened with every passing minute. She carried on with a professionalism that masked a deeper empathy, a skill honed from years of navigating a world that often demanded more than it gave. And while she did not realize it, Jonathan was already forming an impression that would linger. This woman, simple in appearance but extraordinary in patience and kindness, had shown him something rare. She had offered a glimpse of a world where compassion was effortless, where the weight of care did not always have to be lonely. By the time the meal was finished, the boy was content, the father visibly relieved. And Maggie had moved on to the next table, ready to repeat the rhythm of her morning. Yet the memory of the interaction remained, a quiet but powerful imprint on all three of them. Maggie had acted naturally, as she always did, unaware that a small moment of care would have such a profound effect. Jonathan, on the other hand, sat back for a moment, reflecting on the unexpected kindness of a stranger, realizing that the world still held people capable of gentle, selfless acts, and that those acts could touch lives in ways one could never anticipate in that morning of clattering dishes and steaming coffee. Amidst the ordinary flow of life in a neighborhood cafe, a connection had been made. It was a moment so simple, yet so significant. A hard-working waitress, a wealthy father and his young son, brought together by empathy, care, and the quiet power of human kindness. Though neither Maggie nor Jonathan could have known it at the time, This encounter would plant seeds that could one day grow into life-changing opportunities, reminding them both that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the greatest weight. The sunlight streaming through the cafe windows cast a warm glow across the room, making the morning seem even more peaceful. Ethan sat in his high chair, now calm and curious, his dark eyes scanning the world around him. He had begun the day fussy and restless, but something had shifted. Maggie's gentle approach had allowed him to relax, and even Jonathan, who had spent so many moments carrying the weight of constant worry, felt a rare sense of ease. The room hummed with life, yet at this small corner table, there was a unique moment unfolding, quiet and significant, that seemed to exist outside the rush of the world. Maggie knelt beside Ethan again, crouching low so she could meet his gaze. "Do you like strawberries?" she asked, holding out a small piece on her finger. Ethan blinked, then reached hesitantly, his tiny fingers brushing against hers. The connection was immediate. His lips curved into a tentative smile, the first of the day, and Maggie's own smile widened in response. She had learned long ago that small gestures could carry enormous meaning, especially for children who relied on patience and trust to navigate the world. Every little step of progress, every smile, every response mattered. Jonathan watched quietly, noting the ease with which Maggie engaged his son. There was no rush, no pressure, only a patient attention that seemed to understand Ethan's needs instinctively. Jonathan had seen many people attempt to interact with his son, some with awkward gestures, others with impatience or indifference. But Maggie's approach was different. She didn't try to control or force. She simply guided, encouraged, and celebrated every small success. It was a natural connection that warmed Jonathan's heart. He found himself leaning back slightly, allowing himself to absorb the scene without interference. As Ethan sampled the strawberry, Maggie made small, playful sounds, encouraging him to respond. His face lit up with joy, and he clapped his hands, delighted by the interaction. Maggie's laughter was light and genuine, infectious in its simplicity. Jonathan felt a warmth spreading in his chest that he rarely experienced outside private family moments. Watching someone care so deeply and naturally for his son was both humbling and moving. In that moment, he realized that kindness, patience, and empathy could create bonds that transcended wealth, or status, or circumstance. The conversation began. Slowly, first with Maggie speaking to Ethan in simple phrases, then gently including Jonathan. "He seems very curious today," she said, smiling up at Jonathan. Her voice was calm, friendly, and non-intrusive, allowing him to relax. Jonathan nodded, appreciating the observation. He realized that in all the years he had navigated business, meetings, boardrooms, and complex deals, he had rarely encountered someone who could observe and respond to emotion with such clarity and warmth. Maggie didn't just see Ethan. She saw him as a person with feelings, needs, and a personality that deserved attention and respect. Encouraged by Maggie's approach, Jonathan began to speak more freely, sharing small details about Ethan's life. He talked about the challenges of daily routines, the difficulty of finding caregivers who could handle Ethan with patience, and the small victories that brightened their lives. Maggie listened attentively, nodding occasionally, her expressions showing understanding rather than judgment. She asked gentle questions, offering encouragement without intrusion. And Jonathan found himself opening up in a way he rarely did with strangers. There was something in her demeanor, a combination of empathy, intelligence, and warmth, that allowed him to trust her in a matter of minutes, something that often took years with others. Ethan, meanwhile, began to engage more actively. Maggie's playful encouragement led him to reach for more pieces of fruit, explore the textures and colors of his surroundings, and even respond to small prompts with gestures and sounds. Response was met with praise, each success celebrated quietly but meaningfully. Jonathan watched, amazed at the way Maggie could create a bridge of communication with his son. It was not just about feeding or entertaining Ethan, it was about connecting, understanding and validating his small but significant efforts to interact with the world around him. As the meal progressed, Maggie noticed subtle signs of fatigue in Jonathan. He had been leaning slightly forward, his shoulders tense, his hands occasionally fidgeting with the napkin on the table. She did not comment, did not interfere, but simply continued her gentle guidance with Ethan, allowing Jonathan to observe and participate at his own pace. Jonathan recognized the thoughtfulness in her approach. She was not just caring for his son. She was also attentive to him, understanding the pressures he carried silently, offering support in the smallest, most respectful ways. Jonathan's admiration for Maggie grew quietly. He realized that her ability to balance patience, empathy, and practical action was remarkable. She had stepped into a situation that could easily have been stressful and turned it into a calm, joyful interaction. He thought about the countless times he had struggled alone with Ethan, facing challenges that seemed insurmountable, and he felt a wave of gratitude for this stranger who had entered their lives with such grace and understanding. It was a reminder that even in a world driven by schedules, responsibilities, and wealth, the simplest acts of kindness held immeasurable value. Maggie continued to engage Ethan with a natural rhythm, her voice playful, her gestures gentle, and her presence calming. She asked the boy about small things he could understand, celebrated his successes, and offered comfort whenever he showed signs of distress. Jonathan found himself relaxing, trusting her completely. He even allowed himself to smile, laugh softly at her jokes, and feel a lightness he hadn't experienced in weeks. For the first time that morning, he didn't feel the constant weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. Instead, he could observe, appreciate, and participate in a moment of human connection that was simple yet profoundly moving. The cafe around them continued its normal rhythm, but the energy at their table was unique. There was a quiet magic in the way Maggie interacted with Ethan, a sense of harmony and understanding that made Jonathan pause and reflect. He thought about the rare moments in life when someone comes along and changes your perspective, not through grand gestures, but through small, thoughtful acts. Maggie had done that without even realizing it, simply by being present, attentive, and kind. As the morning wore on, Ethan became more animated, more curious, and more comfortable. He responded to Maggie's prompts, explored the textures of his food, and even made small sounds of delight that drew laughter from both Maggie and Jonathan. The father watched closely, feeling a profound sense of relief and joy. This wasn't just a practical help. It was a moment of emotional connection that strengthened the bond between him and his son. He realized that Maggie had created an environment where Ethan could thrive, even for a short time, and that this had a lasting impact on both of their spirits. Maggie, in her quiet and unassuming way, had also created a bridge of understanding with Jonathan. Their brief conversations revealed her intelligence, empathy, and life experience. She spoke about her own struggles, carefully sharing enough to create a human connection without drawing focus away from Ethan. Jonathan listened, intrigued and impressed, realizing that her resilience and compassion were rare qualities, not just in her profession, but in life itself. There was a subtle power in her presence, a combination of kindness, patience, and authenticity that made him reflect on the world around him and his place within it. At one point, Ethan reached toward Jonathan, wanting to interact directly. Maggie encouraged him, guiding the boy's hands gently so he could touch his father's arm. Jonathan responded with the same gentle patience Maggie had shown, a small but significant moment of connection. The sight of his son smiling, laughing, and exploring the world safely filled him with a sense of gratitude that was hard to put into words. He realized that Maggie had not only helped with the physical tasks, but had facilitated emotional moments. He had been longing for moments that strengthened his relationship with his son. By the time the meal concluded, Ethan was calm, content, and engaged. Jonathan felt a lightness he had not experienced in weeks. Maggie had done more than assist in a practical sense. She had created a space where both father and son could breathe, connect, and feel joy. Jonathan realized that her presence had made an extraordinary difference, not because of wealth or status, but because of empathy, patience, and the willingness to care without expectation. As Maggie moved on to other tasks, clearing tables and serving other customers. Jonathan sat quietly, reflecting on the morning. He thought about the rarity of encountering someone like her, someone who could so effortlessly balance skill, care, and warmth. It was a reminder that kindness was not measured by grand gestures, but by the ability to notice, respond, and support in ways that truly mattered. He understood, in a quiet but profound way, that Maggie's impact extended far beyond the brief encounter at the cafe. She had created a moment of connection that would linger in their lives, a seed of hope, trust, and human warmth that neither he nor Ethan would forget. A few days after that quiet morning at the cafe, Maggie returned to her usual routine, unaware that her life was on the verge of a profound change. The morning rush had become her familiar rhythm again: steaming coffee machines, clattering cups, the soft hum of conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter from children at nearby tables. Yet even amidst this ordinary chaos, Maggie felt a small spark of something different. She had been thinking about the man and his son, Jonathan and Ethan, replaying in her mind the moments of connection that had unfolded, the way Jonathan had looked at her, the gratitude in his eyes, the rare laughter from Ethan. It all lingered in her thoughts, like a soft, unspoken promise that the world could be kinder than it often seemed. Her day started as usual, serving coffee and breakfast plates, wiping down tables, and offering smiles to customers who sometimes returned them and sometimes did not. Maggie had grown accustomed to the quiet routine of service, the subtle rhythm of caring for strangers, many of whom she would never see again. Life had taught her to keep expectations low, to find joy in small victories: a child smiling, a thank you note left on a table, the relief of completing a shift without mishap. Yet, despite her resilience, there was an unspoken weight in her. Life, the financial struggles, the responsibilities of raising a child alone, and the lingering worry about her daughter's future. Then, unexpectedly, her phone buzzed. It was a call from an unknown number, which she initially ignored, thinking it was just another telemarketer or business solicitation, but something in her instincts nudged her to answer. A calm, professional voice spoke on the other end. "Hello, is this Maggie?" it asked. Maggie's voice trembled slightly, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Yes, this is she." The voice continued, gentle yet firm. "My name is Jonathan Harrington. I hope this isn't too much of a surprise, but I wanted to thank you again for helping my son at the cafe the other day. What you did for Ethan meant more than I can express. I was wondering if I could meet with you to discuss a possible opportunity that could help you and your family." Maggie blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Jonathan Harrington, man with the quiet presence and gentle demeanor, was reaching out personally? She could barely believe it. Part of her was skeptical, wondering if this could be a misunderstanding or even a mistake. Yet the tone in his voice, the sincerity she had glimpsed in his eyes during that morning at the cafe, convinced her otherwise. She agreed to meet, her mind buzzing with curiosity, apprehension, and a cautious hope that perhaps something good could emerge from this encounter. The meeting took place a few days later in a small, quiet office space that belonged to Jonathan. The room was warm, comfortable, and inviting, not imposing or formal. Reflecting Jonathan's personality more than his wealth, Maggie stepped in, cautiously, her heart racing as she tried to imagine what he could want from her. Jonathan greeted her with a warm smile, shaking her hand firmly but gently. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know this may be unexpected, but please, have a seat." Maggie did, her nerves tingling with anticipation and uncertainty. Jonathan began by recounting the day at the cafe, describing the moments with Ethan that Maggie had thought were ordinary. He spoke about her patience, her kindness, and her ability to connect with his son in a way that no one else had managed. "You have a rare gift," he said quietly, "not just for helping Ethan, but for the way you care, the way you notice what others need without being asked. I've spent my life managing businesses, investments, and people, but what you did was more valuable than any deal or strategy I've ever encountered. You reminded me of something important, that true care and empathy can change lives." Maggie listened in stunned silence. She had never imagined that her simple act of helping a small boy could resonate in such a profound way. She had acted instinctively, naturally, without thinking about reward or recognition. And yet here she was, being acknowledged in a manner that felt both humbling and astonishing. She tried to speak, but her words stumbled, caught between disbelief and gratitude. Jonathan smiled reassuringly, giving her the space to absorb his words. Then he presented the opportunity. It was not a fleeting or trivial offer. Jonathan had created a small grant program to support families like Maggie's, those facing financial struggles but driven by integrity, compassion, and the desire to create a better life for their children. The program could provide educational scholarships for her daughter, funds to alleviate some of her financial burdens, and even mentorship to help Maggie pursue her personal and professional aspirations. I want to give you the chance to focus on your family, on your dreams, and on the things that truly matter, Jonathan explained. I've seen how hard you work, and I believe in giving people the opportunity to grow when they deserve it. Maggie's mind raced. This was more than she could have ever imagined. The struggles she had faced seemed suddenly lighter. The burden of endless worry eased by the possibility of support that came not from loans or charity, but from genuine recognition of her worth and potential. She felt a surge of emotions, gratitude, disbelief, hope, and even fear. Was this real? Could someone truly see her efforts and care enough to offer such a life-changing opportunity? She glanced at Jonathan, noting the sincerity in his eyes, the steady confidence in his voice, and the quiet conviction that he believed in her. It was impossible to doubt him, Jonathan continued, outlining the practical aspects of the offer. He explained that the scholarship for her daughter would cover school fees, extracurricular activities, and even tutoring, providing opportunities that had previously seemed out of reach. He spoke of a mentorship program that could help Maggie explore her professional talents, perhaps in community service or working with children with special needs, leveraging her natural skills and empathy. This isn't a handout, Jonathan said. It's a chance to invest in someone who already demonstrates the qualities that can make a real difference in the world. You've shown me that you care deeply, and I want to help you build on that. Maggie felt tears prick at her eyes. She had struggled for so long, carrying responsibilities alone, sacrificing her own dreams to ensure her daughter had a chance at a better future. And now, here was a man she barely knew, offering support that could change everything. She tried to compose herself, nodding and speaking softly, her voice quivering. I don't know what to say, she admitted. I never expected something like this. I've just tried to do my best. Jonathan shook his head gently, smiling. That's exactly why you're here, he said. Because your best deserves to be recognized and supported. You've earned this through your care, your effort, and your heart. The discussion continued, practical details mixed with personal reflection. Jonathan wanted Maggie to understand that this wasn't charity, was an investment in someone whose values aligned with the kind of world he wanted to support. He spoke about his own experiences as a parent, the challenges of raising Ethan, the deep appreciation he had for individuals who could offer genuine kindness in the face of difficulty. Maggie listened, absorbing not just the offer but the story behind it, the humanity of the man she had helped. She realized that this connection, born from a simple act of care at a cafe, had blossomed into something that could shape her family's future in ways she had only dreamed of. By the end of the meeting, Maggie felt a mixture of exhilaration and humility. The opportunity before her was not just financial. It was a recognition of her worth, her empathy, and her perseverance. Jonathan had transformed a simple moment, the act of helping a small child, into a chance for her to rewrite her life, to give her daughter the opportunities she had longed to provide, to explore her own potential beyond survival and struggle. Maggie left the office with a heart full of gratitude, her mind buzzing with possibilities, a sense of hope that felt almost fragile in its intensity. As she walked back into the bustling streets, Maggie reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. Only a few days earlier, she had been serving coffee and pastries, focused on her routine, her responsibilities, and her dreams constrained by circumstance. Now, an unexpected act of kindness and an extraordinary recognition of her heart had opened doors she had never imagined. The possibilities stretched before her like a horizon she had once thought unreachable. She realized with a quiet awe that sometimes life rewards not the loud, calculated actions, but the small, sincere gestures that touch the hearts of others in meaningful ways. The encounter also left her thinking deeply about Jonathan and Ethan. She understood that this wasn't just about charity. It was about human connection, about recognizing the value in others, and about the profound impact that empathy could have. Her own struggles, long and exhausting, suddenly felt part of a larger story, a story in which compassion, kindness, and courage could ripple outward and create change far beyond what any one person might imagine. She felt inspired not only to embrace the opportunity before her, but also to carry forward the lesson she had learned that the smallest acts of care can truly transform lives. Years passed since that extraordinary morning at the cafe, yet the memory of it remained vivid in Maggie's mind. The act that had once seemed so ordinary, lifting a small child with care, had blossomed into a series of life-changing opportunities that had reshaped her world entirely. Maggie's life had transformed in ways she had never imagined, not just materially, but emotionally and spiritually. She now understood in a profound way. The ripple of one compassionate act could reach far beyond its initial moment, touching lives and creating paths that had previously seemed impossible. Her daughter, Emily, who had once worried about how they would afford school books and activities, now thrived in a nurturing environment that encouraged her curiosity and talents. The scholarship Jonathan had provided covered her education fully, allowing Emily to attend a school that challenged her intellect, encouraged her creativity, and surrounded her with friends who shared her enthusiasm for learning. Maggie watched her daughter grow into a confident, joyful young girl, free to explore her potential without the constant weight of financial limitations. The sense of relief and pride Maggie felt was immense. But even more than that, she felt a renewed purpose, a drive to give back, to make the same kind of difference for others that had been made for her family. Maggie herself had evolved as well. With Jonathan's guidance and the mentorship program he had arranged, she discovered talents and passions she had long neglected. She became involved in initiatives supporting families with children who had disabilities, drawing upon her natural empathy, experience, and understanding to make a tangible difference. She helped other parents navigate the challenges of caregiving, offering advice, emotional support, and practical solutions. Her work began to gain recognition not because she sought attention, but because the results were evident. Families were supported, children were happier and more engaged, and hope was restored in lives that had once felt isolated or overwhelmed. Jonathan and Ethan remained a constant presence in Maggie's life. Though their connection was built on mutual respect rather than obligation, Jonathan admired Maggie's strength, her ability to turn adversity into opportunity, and the warmth she brought to every interaction. Ethan, now older, still remembered the gentle way Maggie had first cared for him, and he responded to her presence with familiarity and trust. The bond that had formed in that small cafe continued to grow over the years, strengthened by shared experiences, mutual understanding, and a recognition of the profound impact they had had on each other's lives. Maggie often reflected on how far she had come. The transformation was not instantaneous, nor was it easy, but it was deeply fulfilling. She had faced her doubts, her fears, and the everyday challenges of life, yet she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more capable than ever. She had learned that compassion and dedication could be more powerful than wealth or privilege. Alone, that kindness could open doors that seemed permanently closed, and that the courage to act with empathy even in small ways could ripple across lifetimes. There were quiet moments when Aggie would sit and think about the morning at the cafe, the simplicity of the gesture that had sparked it all. She remembered Ethan's tentative smile, Jonathan's grateful gaze, and the subtle yet profound connection that had been formed in a few short minutes. Those memories reminded her that life's most meaningful moments were often unplanned, spontaneous, and rooted in human connection rather than calculated effort. She realized that her willingness to act without expectation had been the catalyst for everything that followed. She carried that lesson with her into every interaction she had thereafter. The ripple effects of that morning extended far beyond Maggie's own life. Emily, now flourishing academically and socially, began to develop her own sense of empathy and understanding. She witnessed firsthand the difference that kindness, opportunity, and support could make in a person's life, and she absorbed those lessons with an eagerness to apply them in her own way. Maggie encouraged her daughter to participate in volunteer activities, to reach out to peers who needed help, and to value the importance of genuine care in every action. Emily learned that power was not measured in wealth or status, but in the ability to positively impact the lives of others. Maggie's advocacy work also began to influence the wider community. Families who had struggled with limited resources found practical assistance, emotional support, and a renewed sense of hope through her guidance. Local organizations that supported children with disabilities partnered with her, recognizing the value of her experience and her ability to communicate, teach, and inspire. Maggie's reputation grew not through self-promotion, but through the tangible results of her dedication and the trust she had built with those she helped. What began as a personal act of care had expanded into a larger mission to ensure that other families could experience the same support, understanding, and opportunities that she and her daughter had been fortunate enough to receive. Jonathan observed these developments with quiet satisfaction. He had always believed that resources, whether financial, social, or emotional, were most valuable when used to create real, lasting change. Maggie's growth, Emily's flourishing, and the ripple of influence in the community confirmed that belief. Yet beyond the practical outcomes, there was also a deeper satisfaction. Seeing the human spirit thrive when given encouragement, opportunity, and recognition. Jonathan often reflected on that first morning at the cafe and marveled at the simplicity of the moment that had begun everything. A small act of care extended without hesitation transformed multiple lives in ways he could not have predicted. Ethan, too, had grown. With the continuing support of Jonathan and the gentle guidance of Maggie, he became more confident, more comfortable, and more engaged in the world around him. Maggie had maintained her connection with him, offering playful encouragement, celebrating his milestones, and helping him develop social and cognitive skills in ways that complemented Jonathan's efforts at home. The relationship they shared became a model of understanding and compassion, demonstrating that love and care could bridge gaps created by challenges and limitations. Maggie often thought about the countless small choices and actions that had led her to this point. The morning at the cafe, the decision to help a struggling child, the patient care she had offered. Each choice had seemed minor at the time, but together they created a path that reshaped her family's life entirely. She understood now that her choices, no matter how small, carried the potential to create meaningful change, both for herself and for others. It was a lesson she carried into every interaction, every decision, and every effort she undertook, knowing that the ripple of one compassionate act could extend far beyond its origin as the years continued. Maggie's life was full of achievements, milestones, and moments of joy. Emily excelled in her studies, pursued her interests with passion, and developed a sense of empathy and responsibility that reflected the values her mother had instilled. Maggie herself found fulfillment in her work, her advocacy, and her ability to positively impact the lives of families in need. Jonathan remained a supportive figure, not as a benefactor or overseer, but as a friend, mentor, and witness to the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple act of care. The story of that morning, once a fleeting moment, became a cornerstone of Maggie's understanding of life. She often shared it with others, not as a tale of wealth or charity, but as a testament to the power of empathy, patience, and human connection. She encouraged people to recognize that anyone could make a difference, that even small gestures could create profound impact, and that genuine care, extended without expectation, could transform lives in ways that were often unpredictable but always meaningful. Maggie's journey also reinforced the idea that true transformation is rarely instant. The changes in her life, her daughter's life, and the broader community had unfolded gradually, built on sustained effort, consistent care, the ripple effects of a single moment of kindness. She understood that patience, persistence, and a willingness to act with compassion were essential ingredients for creating lasting impact. The life-changing gesture she had received from Jonathan was amplified by her own choices, her own dedication, and her ongoing efforts to nurture the potential in herself, her family, and others in quiet moments. Maggie would reflect on the journey and marvel at how a simple act of lifting a child, offered without expectation or recognition, had catalyzed such profound change. She recognized that her life had been transformed not only materially, but emotionally and spiritually. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for Jonathan's recognition and support. But she also understood that the true power lay in the human capacity for empathy and action, the ability to see a need and respond, to care, and to invest in others' potential.